You're listening to Cards to the Moon, a podcast about trading cards from both a collector and investor perspective. We hope you'll stick around for the ride as we take a deep dive into the state of the hobby, share some hot takes, hopefully some useful advice, and fun stories along the way. Hey guys, welcome back to Cards to the Moon. This is episode 148, and my name is Clark from 5cardguys.com and 5cardguys on Instagram. With me co-hosting as usual is Hyung of Integrity Sports Cards and John, who is Trade You at Recess. Today we have a special guest on the show. His name is Samuel C. Evans, aka at the Sports Card Collector on Instagram. It's not how you think you spell it, so we'll put that in the show notes below. I think you'll enjoy this interview we had with Samuel, especially if you're a fellow hobby content creator. With nearly 8,000 followers on IG, we asked him about his process and how he does it on top of a full-time job as an educator. And if you're more of a collector than an investor, you'll probably relate more to his hobby journey as he reflects on his experience as a collector, including the people he's met along the way and how some of them even helped him complete the 1986 Fleer basketball set. So that was a pretty cool story he shared in the interview. So stick around for that. But first, off the top, I wanted to quickly touch upon the news of LIV and the PGA merging. All right, I know this is golf news that happened a few weeks ago and we didn't get a chance to talk about it yet. But I was reminded of this because I saw a recent statistic on the Collectibles Guru's Twitter page that there has been 11 sales of golf cards that sold for more than 100,000. All right, it's for 11 sales of golf cards that sold for at least six figures, and 10 of 11 are of just one golfer. And it might actually just be, I thought it was one card, but it's probably two cards when I checked. So obviously you probably know who that golfer is. Tiger Woods. Yeah. And the card that sold for six figures multiple times is the SP Authentic Auto Gold, which is numbered to 100, I believe, right? Mm-hmm. And there's a base numbered to 900, and it's autographed as well. And I think one or two of those sold for at least 100K. So 10 Crazy. Of those 11 sales are all Tiger Woods of that card variation. Okay, so that's why I want to ask you guys: do you think the LIV PGA merge can raise the profile of other golfers, so in the future their rookie cards could be worth six figures one day? In essence, is this merge a good or bad thing for the hobby and by proxy golf cards?
One, no, but I'll come back to that. Who's the 11th? Who's the other guy?
I was going to save that, but we can address it.
Okay, we can address it later.
No, let's do it now.
I'm gonna say, man, it has to be. I was thinking old school, but then I don't think
old school. Definitely old school.
It is old school.
Yes, vintage,
eh? So is it a Jack Nicklaus?
Older.
Really?
Older.
What's a vintage?
A historic figure in golf.
Right. What would be when was golf are there vintage golf cards? There must be. Mm-hmm. It must be like a postcard or something.
Think Babe Ruth style card.
Yeah. I'm just trying to think of names.
You guys are the golfers.
There
has been, but I don't think you saw it. Maybe you did. I don't know.
Ben Hogan? No.
Mm-mm. I don't know this guy.
Okay, go on.
Yeah, go.
But you might. Okay, I'll give you another clue, all right? According to this bio, he founded and helped design the Augusta National Golf Club, and he co-founded the Masters Tournament.
Co-founded the Masters Tournament.
Oh. I know about the Masters, so obviously this guy's legit in the golf world.
Man, I'm drawing a blank, Clark. You're gonna have to
Yeah, me too.
The answer, I'm sure we have golf. Huh? I'm sure there's golfers that are listening to this podcast like screaming out the name, but his name is Bobby Jones.
Bobby Jones, yes. That's it. That's what I was saying. There is a movie on him. Yes.
Yeah. Jim Caviezel, I think, was
what year was it? What year was this card? Do you know?
Yep, 1932.
Like in the 30s or like?
Yes, 1932 U.S. Caramel Bobby Jones golf card, mint PSA 9, sold for 105,000.
Amazing.
The next time Will is on,
that's crazy.
He's gonna say he was screaming out Bobby Jones.
So going back to your question, I don't think so. It's given, we've talked about, Tiger Woods being the majority of sales, and then you have a vintage art piece that is the next six-figure sale. It doesn't mean that there aren't opportunities in golf. I just think that there's a long ways to go with golf. Specifically, we don't even hear about releases or, anything that it's like, man, I'm can't wait till SP releases this year or anything like that. And I think, like for me, I own a Tiger Woods. John has the same gold SP Authentic, the non-auto version, PSA 10. And to me, it's like, that's pretty much for me, at least, my golf investment in Tiger Woods. And, I just don't think that today's market right now will help, or even the news will help the golf card market in the immediate future. I think there still has to be a lot of things that need to be done for the golf market to prove that it's sustainable. And it doesn't help that we're in a bear market in cards in general. So these secondary sports that, fall behind to football, basketball, baseball, they're going to be kind of like the ones that kind of take the hit,
right?
Especially, just based on supply and demand, right? So I think there's still going to be demand for Tiger Woods, golfers like Jack Nicklaus, golfers like Rory McIlroy. John has a PMG of Rory, and I remember when he bought it, and he's done well with it. So there's definitely opportunity, but I don't think specifically the news will have an impact necessarily on the card market in golf.
Okay.
Yeah. So for myself previously, obviously I had, I was a fan of the golf space, and I thought it would have, had an opportunity to go up, especially with the Netflix series, which was pretty underwhelming, to be honest, with season 1. And I chatted about that. Mm-hmm. But in this current bear market where a lot of correction is happening, and especially niche sports that we started to talk about has really taken a hit. I think it's going to take a lot for golf cards to make any kind of noise at this point. And in terms of the merger itself, this is in the golf world. I think people who watch golf sort of knew that this was, at some point, something was going to happen. Either those guys over at Live is going to come back. And there's so many memes about this being just exactly like The Office. When the Michael Scott Paper Company, and he's like fraudulently saying like, well, we're making a lot of money. It's like literally the exact same situation. So,
great episode.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a blip in the overall PGA world. Like, this is just, the news came and it went, and it's going to mean nothing.
Yeah.
The good is that it's going to probably be a great Netflix series 2, like a season 2, or maybe, I don't know if it's going to be season 2 or season 3.
Right.
But it's good. It's good for the Netflix series. But in terms of golf cards, man, I think, and the thing that the tough part is golf cards is with Upper Deck, right? And I don't know how much Upper Deck would be willing to, especially in a bear market, willing to invest or put more into golf cards. But like Hyung is saying, is there potential in golf cards? Very, very select. I think Tiger Woods is the guy to go for, because he is, he transcends just golf. He is a GOAT within all sports.
Right.
So I think Tiger Woods is the right guy. And other cards, there might be. I saw, like I was mentioning before, like Colin Morikawa. it's not even a part of the SP set. It's actually from Goodwin, and it's exquisite rookie auto, and his exquisite rookie auto raw went for like $1,500. Colin Morikawa, right?
Yeah.
So I think if it's the right, like PMG or exquisite auto, some kind of iconic branding that is married with a pretty popular golfer, I think that could work. But in terms of like golf carts in general, I unless you're a really big fan, in terms of investment, probably best to stay away until something bigger happens.
All right, I'm going to take both your words for it because I know nothing about golf other than, I hear the news with Liv and, of course they're backed by Saudi money. I'm keeping politics out of it, but if they have that much money, if they can market it even better than they have, I could see some of these, players raise their profiles, like golf becoming even more mainstream than it is now. Then maybe other golfers that aren't named Tiger Woods has a chance to get a larger profile in the spotlight. And then, who knows, right? Everything has to break the right way to see future six-figure sales. But that's why I want to ask the questions. But you guys know better than I do where the state of golf is currently. So, yeah, it'll be interesting to see how not just golf, but niche sports kind of, where the value is in cards when it comes to niche sports. So we'll keep an eye on that. All right, without further ado then, let's run our interview that we had with Samuel C. Evans, aka the Sports Card Collector. All right, today we have another special guest on the pod. His name is Samuel C. Evans, and you can find him on Instagram with the handle at the Sports Card Collector, which isn't spelled in the conventional way, so we'll link his profile in our show notes below. But what stuck out to me personally with his hobby content is that first, Samuel is consistent with creating hobby content and runs on a weekly schedule. And it doesn't surprise me. He's closing in on 8,000 followers on Instagram, which is great. So I think it'll be really valuable for many of our listeners who are thinking of putting out hobby content themselves to see how he manages to do that on top of, I know he has a regular day job. So that must be a challenge. Plus, if you look at some of his videos, there's obvious production value that he puts into it. So that I'm sure must take time as well. And second, I like the general tone of positivity in his posts, which seems to be rare these days in not just within the hobby, but on the internet in general. And third, on our podcast intro, we say that we like to talk about cards from both a collector and investor perspective, but sometimes we tend to focus more on the investment side of things, which I think is fine. But I know many of us, including myself, we also collect cards that really has more intrinsic value born out of nostalgia. And if you read Samuel's Instagram bio, it says, dope hobby content and the pure nostalgia for collecting. So I hope in this interview we could talk more from a collector perspective as well. Anyway, without further ado, Samuel, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you for having me. Oftentimes, like when I get DMs from various people who have podcasts, I often think like, man, it takes a lot of courage for people to say, I'm going to start a podcast. I'm going to put myself out there. I'm going to interview people. So I just appreciate you for thinking of me, finding something that resonates with you and giving me an opportunity to tell my story on your platform.
Of course.
It means a lot.
Of course, yeah. And I really appreciate your time. So it works both ways. Actually, before we get into your content specifically, I was wondering if we can start from the beginning of your hobby journey. When did you start collecting? For how long? Essentially, what is your hobby origin story?
So it's funny you mentioned that because I'm putting together an article right now because I write for Hobby News Daily about like what I think the hobby should look like, and could be for the next 150 years. So I'm thinking past me because obviously I won't be on the planet.
Right.
If I am, that's awesome. But 150 years from now, probably not.
It's a long time.
But my origin story is similar to everyone else who comes into the hobby. That pure moment about a nosiness or curiosity from a dad, uncle, big brothers. And for me, it was my big brothers, going through their sneaker boxes and finding their cards and like, what are these things?
Right.
seeing these iconic rookie cards that they had as a kid, it really piqued my interest. And, next thing you know, I'm like, I want to collect cards.
Okay.
And at the time, being 8, 9 years old, I had no knowledge of like, quote unquote, the hobby, because we didn't call it the hobby
Right.
in the early 90s, you know what I mean? But
True.
I had no knowledge of cards. So it was just pure curiosity, intrigue, and then the prior knowledge, right? I'm an educator, the prior knowledge of having these images in my mind of these like athletes that we looked up to and we saw on TV, and that we had posters of them in our room, and I heard people in my neighborhood talking about them and debating about them, and just going into that space at that time with that knowledge was like, oh wow, I couldn't articulate that as an 8 to 9 year old, but I can articulate it now, like having this encapsulated moment of this athlete that I look up to, and admire. So
yeah, that's awesome.
For me, it was a no-brainer.
And
it was a no-brainer.
When you say the athlete you looked up to, is there one that just comes to your mind right now?
I mean, obviously, I collected in the era where, the 3 most powerful men in the world, all their names was, Mike Tyson, Michael Jordan,
right,
and Michael Jackson, So, I was enamored by Michael Jordan, the psychology of it. Whether it was by manipulation or like just out of pure curiosity,
Yeah.
Everybody wanted to be like Mike.
True.
And so, yes, I was the MJ collector. And in my neighborhood, my 5 to 10 block radius, and especially Letlow Elementary School, everybody in my neighborhood who collected cards, we were all chasing Michael Jordan because, if you had the best Michael Jordan cards, that came with some bragging rights.
Yeah, clout.
Respectfully, So, that was my journey. Cool. However, everyone, and maybe it's not everyone, but for me, growing up where I grew up at, things change, times change, and neighborhoods change, and things that kids used to like, you're thrust into like survival mode because of everything that might be happening around you, and you tend to put things to the back burner, or whether it's something personal that's going on in your family that impacts you. And at 12, 13, I packed up all my cards and threw them away because I couldn't be a kid anymore. And it always felt like that was some unfinished business. And I briefly came back to the hobby at 19 when one of my roommates in prep school gave me a binder of his old cards.
Okay.
But I was like far removed from collecting at the time.
Yeah.
I was in love with basketball and wanting to play college basketball and everything. So, I kept them over the years. And, fast forward to a global pandemic, and lockdown, we're all sitting at home.
Right.
And after, doing arts and craft with the family, watching movies, reading, and then not to mention, everything that was going on in our world in terms of like social unrest and social justice and those systemic and structural issues that impact a lot of marginalized groups, and the things that happened with George Floyd. You needed that moment to like, what's the release? What's the escape? And just going into my spare bedroom and finding, that binder of cards and some packs of cards that I picked up from a flea market,
right
before the lockdown happened. It just rekindled this passion of like all these memories and the nostalgia and the joy and the excitement. And at first I was like, I want to be an investor. I want to sell cards because immediately, like, that was the snapshot. That was the window I looked through.
Right.
When I had to go back to hobby school and say, like, what does collecting look like now? Because the last time I collected, it looked totally different.
Sure.
And it looked totally different in a way where like we had these organic hobby ecosystems, these cardboard systems where we traded. We talked about cards. You know, we would get cards from big box stores, but we didn't have any access to like a local hobby store, or we didn't know anything about like card shows or the publications, the magazines that came out during that time.
Right.
But I had to go back to school and like, what's the landscape look like?
Yeah.
And as I did that studying, I realized, I said, this ain't me. I'm not an investor. I'm not a seller. I'm an educator by heart. My passion is to pour into people. My passion is to connect with people and learn their story. And I said, you know what? I'm going to share my hobby story.
Yeah.
And that was
awesome.
The birth of the hobby experience and the sports card collector.
Yeah, amazing. I really appreciate that story and the point you made about the hobby being an outlet for so many people, especially during the pandemic, but in general as well. Like we're kind of past the pandemic, hopefully, and we're still in the hobby, and because we're finding that this is a healthy outlet for many of us.
Yeah, and something that I mean, if someone created it before me, I'll give them all the credit. But just being in this happy space of determining what I want the hobby experience to look like, feel like, and sound like, I coined this phrase, human capital. Now, I know the term human capital as it relates to business is totally different. But I looked at that definition and I said, how can I relate this to the hobby? And looking at the work that I do as an educator, and just in terms of like us coming together as a community, interacting with one another, being intrigued about each other's story as collectors. And, that was the birth of like human capital for me.
Love it.
So all of us coming together to share our experiences, to listen to one another, to explore one another's story as a collector, to do trades, to support one another, to just create that community of that two-way transaction of give and take. Yeah. And it's not necessarily driven by something monetary, but the fact that we share this commonality as collectors.
Yeah.
So.
Amazing. Yeah, it's definitely the best part of the hobby and the best part of this podcast. We've met so many new people that we would never probably have spoken to ever if it wasn't for the hobby. So I want to get a little bit more specific with how you collect. And in one of your posts, you wrote about collecting sets. I think I saw that last week. So I want to ask you, what is it about set collecting that you enjoy? And second, is there a set that you either completed recently or are in the process of completing? And when you're down to your last card, and it must be last for a reason. It must be hard to track down. How hard is it to chase that card down?
Yeah. So, as going back to my first hobby run, I was not a set collector because, again, my access to cards were limited, right? In terms of like when mom said I can get something from a big box store or the cards that circulated throughout our community. And it grew a little bit bigger when I went to Penn Treaty. We would bust to Penn Treaty. And now not only was I collecting with black and brown kids, but I was also collecting with kids who were white. And I got exposed to hockey cards. So my world grew a little bit bigger. But, coming back into the hobby and having access to local hobby stores and seeing the older generation who's still a part of the hobby and going through that journey of fulfilling and sets that they've been collecting or looking to fulfill and complete for the past 20 years. I was like, man, I can only imagine what the stories sound like, feel like, and look like, what those moments look like when you get down to the last card, or it's a huge chase card in that set that can sometimes be out of reach, and you were in the right place at the right time with the right people, and you were able to get that card. And I said, you know what? Yes, I have this PC of all the players that I love and adore from the 90s and even up into modern cards now. But there was those, as I went back to hobby school and doing that research and learning the hobby from the tobacco era and even past the tobacco, before the tobacco era, up until now, there were a lot of sets that stood out to me. And one was the 1986, Flair Premier set, and I completed it.
Oh, nice.
I have all the cards. I have the Jordan. My last card was Karl Malone. And it was a journey, and I was able to get that card at the Philly Card Show in 2022. And I tell people, yes, it's good to PC an individual player, but it's nothing like going through the process of completing a set. The opportunity to meet so many people, the opportunity to explore different local hobby stores, the opportunity to go to those small or big card shows, and just the journey of the unknown, because no set that you chase or want to complete is the same.
Right.
The process isn't the same. Now the rules of engagement are the same, but the process is just so different. And it gives me something to write about, gives me something to explore. And even on that journey, it allows me to connect with other people who are doing the same thing I'm doing, and maybe I can help them out.
Yeah.
Because when I was on my 86 chase, there was a lot of people who sent me cards, and I was able to pay it forward and send them cards as well, other people cards as well.
Yeah.
And that's why I collect sets.
I love
it's just
it.
the opportunity to connect with people, be in that space, to understand that journey, and to get to that card that you never thought you could possibly get, but now you
True.
have it. So it's exploration. That's the best way to sum it up.
Must feel good for sure. And I was thinking with collectors that are coming into the game now, these modern sets are harder to complete sets because the checklist is greatly expanded. There's so many parallels. And for me, people that listen to this podcast know I'm trying to complete this home field advantage subset from Topps Baseball that came out last year. And it's a subset, so it's manageable and doable of 30 cards. And what I enjoyed about it the most was not just tracking each card down. And you could track a lot of them through eBay these days, right? I'm not going to lie.
Yeah.
But the fact that when people know that you're collecting a certain set, their generosity shows. They're like, oh, I got this card that would be perfect for your set. They just give it to me. They don't even, right? And that's amazing to see that as well.
No, it's definitely amazing. Like when I started my Flair Premier 86, 87 chase, people was like, man, you're going to spend a ton of money. And right. I just had this I had this unwavering optimism that that's not going to be the case. And it all started when this random guy just sent me a message on Instagram and said, hey, I was reading through your stuff and I saw that you were starting in Flair, the 86 Flair set, and I want to help you out. And he sent me 19 cards.
Amazing.
And there were top stars of 19 cards. And I said, how much do I owe you? He said, no, just pay it forward and keep being a great collector.
Yeah. And,
that's what inspired me to continue to tell my story in this space, that, yes, I understand that this is a business and it's a monetary driven industry. But there's so much untapped potential in that other side that only helps the industry sustain itself and gets better.
Yeah. And
I just think more people need to tap into that. I think those stories need to be told because they don't happen they don't happen in a silo. I think they happen all throughout the hobby. And I think that needs to be at the forefront.
Yeah.
More.
I agree with you 100%. And I know a lot of that hobby experience that you share makes up a lot of your hobby content. So, it's what we do in the podcast, to create hobby content. And I kind of want to get a little bit more practical. I feel like as more people do come into the hobby, this is something they want to try out. But it's really easy to give up after a month or two when you don't see immediate traction of gaining followers and subscribers. So I was wondering if we could take a moment where you can share about how you approach creating hobby content and what works for you.
Yeah, I just do what makes me happy. And I've said this in every interview I've done. Don't follow me, follow the hobby experience. If you follow me, thank you. I do this because, one, it's therapeutic and it has a positive impact on my mental health. To be creative and to also be passionate about something. And to showcase that passion so my children can see it and say, you know what, it's okay to be passionate about something. And there's no like age limit on exploring that passion. You can do it any day, anytime, any year. And be firm in that passion and be firm in that exploration of how you want to share your story as it relates to something you care about. And I don't care what it is, whether it's crocheting, buying shoes, or thrift shopping, everything. If you have a story to tell that story. And for me, I just try to be my authentic self and share my experiences with the hope that it resonates with someone. And if it resonates with you and you drop me a comment, I also want to extend my gratitude for you taking the time to listen, read, and drop a comment because it resonated with you in some way. So for me, it's just that I understand the only way that I can truly reach my full potential as a human being in every facet of my life, I have to connect with other human beings. And I call that like the human collective. And for us as a society to reach our human collective, we got to come into contact with other human beings. And we do that in many ways in the different facets of our life, whether it be personally and professionally. And this is something that, you know, I believe in, that I'm committed to. And again, I'm just enjoying the journey and the manifestation of this journey of where I started and where I'm at now, and being able to talk about, you know, my grows and glows in a way that, you know what, if I have only one like, that's okay. If I have 200 likes, that's okay too. But I don't necessarily do it for that. I just do it for the reason that these platform gives us an opportunity to explore who we are in an in-depth way. And if we can create a community in that exploration or connections in that exploration, then I fulfill my goal. And it allows me to continue to grow as a human being.
No, great words of advice. And even your basic point, I totally agree with that. For content creators, you have to be, you have to enjoy what you're doing because if you're doing it for the likes and subscribes, that could be discouraging very, very quickly. And you'll end up quitting really early on. So enjoy the process, enjoy what you're doing.
I apply this thought to it as an educator, right? As an educator, kids know when you're not being authentic, and they can figure you out just like that. And for me, that same process of how I connect with my students, connect with my colleagues, and support them and support people in my community, I apply that same process and those same actions to our cardboard community. And just being my authentic self and sharing my story. Let's have discourse about cards. Let's have discourse about society, because society is so directly connected to cards. And sometimes it's hard to separate the two. And that's okay, because it's a part of who you are. It's a part of your journey. And I just enjoy moments like this, Clark, being able to meet new people, being able to be a participant in their cardboard story just as much as they're a participant in my cardboard story.
True. Amazing. I wanted to just talk about one of your pieces of hobby content you call Lost and Found Card of the Week. Wondering how that got started, and you want to share what that's about?
So on my journey, I wanted to figure out, like, as I tell my cardboard story is, yes, that's awesome to share, but it's also bigger than me. So how can I also ensure that I'm giving back? And, you know, that's where the Lost and Found Card of the Week, you know, started. Just going through my personal PC and finding cards that, you know, whether I'm connected to it or, you know, I think I think every card deserves a home, and I'm sure someone out there would appreciate this card. And that's how it began. So just this authentic way of another way of connecting with people in the community, because monetary value is good, right?
Sure.
I get it. We live in a society where money drives a lot of the things because we got to pay bills. We got to be able to live.
Yeah.
But I also think the human wealth of like giving to people is so empowering, and it's so encouraging because it just creates a positive cycle of not necessarily like karma. I don't think that's the word that I'm looking for, but I'm just a firm believer that if you give to the universe will give back to you in many ways. One way could be monetary. One way could be through good friendships and good connections.
Sure.
And I think we need to value those as well.
Yeah.
And, I enjoy my cards of the week, but I really look forward to, my lost and found cards of the week, because just that exploration of going through my PC or receiving something that someone gave me and being able to pay it forward. I just think it's dope. And then it also turned into like, well, if no one in the community claims this card, I found a card club that I sponsor. I'm one of the sponsors for in New York. And he has his own podcast with one of his collecting friends. His name is Craig and Carmine. And, it just became this authentic thing where him and I, we met over Instagram. I actually did one of their shows with them about human capital.
Yeah.
And I've just been I've just been a sponsor of his club ever since.
Cool.
So, if it doesn't go to someone in the community, it's going to his students who are being exposed to the hobby in a very versatile way, be as it on the investor side and then also on the collector side. Because I think when you look at it through the investor lens and you're teaching a kid about the hobby that way, there's a lot of skills for them to learn.
Yeah.
Right. And there's a lot of things that they can learn about market value, stats and data, is, literacy. There's so many components that they can grow at with cards.
For sure.
But he's also teaching them that human value as well, and being able to connect and explore and share and, learn about different genres of cards outside of the sports card world. So,
yeah, that's cool.
I look forward to every week looking through my PC that if someone in the community don't claim this card, I know it's going to a great place, and one of his students are going to be super excited to have.
Yeah, nice. I could tell you're an educator because, you have this, usually have this greater or bigger perspective when it comes to the hobby. The hobby is more than just a hobby in a lot of ways. And I think really my last question before we get to the rapid fire section is that in your latest post, you refer to something called a zero-sum mindset, and how that's the only impediment to us reaching our full potential as a society. But you also relate that, like I said, back to the hobby. So I was wondering if you could explain that a little bit more in detail and what you meant by that.
Yeah, I just think in terms of how that comment relates to society, I think we live in this competitive nature of society.
Mm-hmm.
I get it. I understand it. But as an athlete, right? And I don't want to get too much into the semantics, because that's also connected to like race and how, like, when we operate from a zero-sum mindset, we in terms are all impacted. So, for example, if I have two segregated schools, regardless of income and wealth, or the haves and the have-nots, both groups are suffering because they don't have a melting pot of growth and learning from different people's perspective and having this balance of windows and mirrors to look through, mirrors to like see themselves, but also windows to understand the world of others and the experiences of others. And, I think oftentimes that zero-sum mindset is present in the hobby. But, the optimist in me looks at all the things that we do as collectors. We connect with one another. We share our stories. We like each other's posts. Yeah. We talk about cards in this like authentic way, in this pure way. And I said, these are all innate qualities that we have. in those moments, we're using these innate qualities.
Mm.
Let's take those same qualities and practice them in our everyday life, because there are people who are impacted by policies, procedures, structural and systemic things, whether it's racism, gender related, across the board. And I think if we took the time to use the very skills that we use in a hobby and we apply that to our daily life or in the experiences that we have with the most traditionally marginalized people, we'd be able to really heighten our emotional intelligence, improve our practicing of like authentic empathy, and we can be able to like truly impact the world in a positive way outside of the hobby. Yeah. And I just think the uniqueness of cards, it just creates these things that we do organically. But when we get to the real world, we're emotionally driven because of the political aisle that we sit on, this political belief that we may have. And I think if we start to look past those beliefs, those sometimes what can be like tribal beliefs, and go back to like, wait, this very same person that I was talking to about cards, we had this connection. And because he's talking about a lived experience about society or something societal that I may not agree with, let me take the time to listen to his or her story or their story.
Yeah.
And let me ask questions so I can learn and grow. Because then I would be able to realize that, hey, what you're talking about isn't it about me? You know, how can I help so you won't experience these things? Or what can I do to support you?
Yeah.
And I think if we find that landing spot and be comfortable with uncomfortable conversations, I think we can all grow, whether we agree or disagree politically.
Yeah. I love that. Yeah. Samuel, thanks for sharing that perspective. And I certainly agree. As a former journalist, you know, we're always, it's I guess our job to get both sides. And I know that's difficult for a lot of members of our society to do, for the reasons you cited. And hopefully cards in some small way or in some large way in the future can help bridge that gap. But
that's my hope.
Yeah. But really appreciate your time. Like I mentioned off the air, we always like to end off our interviews with some kind of rapid fire questions, kind of a fun way to end the interview. So if you don't mind, I'm going to ask you about 5 of them. All right. Okay. First one, we always ask this: what's your favorite PC card at the moment and why?
Woo, I can do it better.
You can show me? Oh, Wilt Chamberlain. Wow. SGC3. Yeah. Amazing.
So on my Instagram, I had a scheduled post that just dropped, and that's going to lead into my card of the week on Monday.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. I haven't showed that card to anyone, but you were the first person to see.
I'm honored.
So hopefully the visual of this podcast doesn't come out before I drop my card of the week, but I got those last week, both the in action and the rookie card.
Oh, amazing! That's a nice card.
It's been a whirlwind of good emotion. And, I'm happy about it.
I'm glad to hear it. Well, the second question, I don't know if you have obtained it already with that Wilt Chamberlain rookie. Do you have a Grail card or card that you're still chasing, and what is that?
I would say Hank Aaron, 1954 Hank Aaron rookie card.
Yeah, love it.
That would be my next one.
Okay. If you look on our 5cardguys.com website, I think in my bio, that's my Grail card, the Hank Aaron 1954. The orange background is beautiful.
Yeah, I have a top 10 list of my Grail cards.
Yeah, that's one
Hank
of them.
Aaron is on that top 10 list.
Absolutely. All right. How far have you gone to go to a live card show?
The farthest have been all local in PA and the Philly area. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Number 4, what do you hope to see in the hobby over the next 5 years?
I hope to see authentic and equitable entry points of access for all people, especially the most marginalized groups. I said this before on a podcast show, that when we look at the imagery of cards, 95 to 97% of the people on cards are a person of color. And in some of our most traditionally marginalized communities are people of color.
Right.
And a lot of them grow up to be these people on cards. And I think if we're trying to create authentic entry points of access that are equitable for all kids to be involved in a hobby, girl, boy, or other, I think we need to figure out how, and I use my story. Like, I didn't have a local hobby store in my neighborhood.
Yeah.
I didn't know anything about card shows. So in terms of sustainability, what are we doing to tap into that new target market and to expose people to collecting so kids can have the opportunities to be kids and explore their childhood in another way?
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's what I hope to see. And my hope is maybe one day I can be a driver of that and be connected to the industry in one way to help do that in a sustainable way, because I think we have great examples and exemplars of that with, like, in New York, my boy Craig, who has, the after school card program. And, predominantly all his kids are black and brown. So these kids are being exposed to cards and they're seeing people who look like them on these cards. And it just gives them a way to, explore themselves in another way in terms of the daily stuff that they may go through.
Yeah.
And I think that's important.
Yeah, I agree.
And I always say to myself, if I come into a lot of money one day, I would love to open up a card store in my neighborhood where I grew up.
That'd be an amazing dream for sure. And the last question, any loyal podcast listener will know the last question of these rapid fire always has a Canadian angle, because we are based out of Toronto, Canada, north from you guys. So I know you're a basketball card collector. The question is, well, it's more of a fill in the blank. The best Toronto Raptor of all time is?
Ooh, the best Toronto Raptor of all time is... Now, there's many ways you can say this.
Okay.
As someone who watched 90s, mid to late 90s basketball, you would say Vince Carter. As someone who still watched basketball growing up, you would say Kyle Lowry.
Yeah.
Because he got them to the promised land. Even though he wasn't the focal point,
right,
he delivered.
Yeah.
And he's probably going to have a stature one day in Toronto.
Yeah, he's retiring in Toronto.
He doesn't already now.
Yeah.
So I would say it would be between those two.
Okay.
And then my next person would be Kawhi Leonard, because he came there as the man and he took them to the promised land, and he was the best player in the world.
Yeah.
And he got Toronto an NBA championship.
Yeah.
So I would say out of those three, you can't say Tracy McGrady because he was just so young and he didn't blossom until he left.
Sure.
It's hard for me to say someone like Del Curry. Yeah.
I like those answers.
I would say between those three.
Okay.
And then I was also thinking about, like, maybe I got this wrong. I was thinking about Sam Mitchell. Did he play for Toronto for some time? But I know his main stuff was with the Timberwolves.
Right.
But it's got to be those three.
Yeah. If we had a poll, we've asked this multiple times to basketball card collectors that have come on the show, and Vince Carter will be leading by a mile in that poll. Yeah. It's the first one, and we grew up in the 90s too, so
I mean, Air Canada.
Air Canada, Vinsanity. Yeah.
Yeah.
You can't forget those highlight reel dunks either, so.
Yeah. I mean, and even like and Toronto's has some good players, like Alvin Williams, who's another Philadelphia product. With a good guard there at one time, gave Allen Iverson a lot of trouble in that playoff series. But Toronto's had some good players. But it's got to be those three, between those three.
Yeah.
And if it's Vince Carter, even though he didn't take them to the promised land, he put Toronto basketball on the map for a
sure.
long time. And, as he was going towards the end of his career, I was wondering, like, does Toronto sign him so he could retire a Raptor? So.
There were some talks. Yeah, there were some talks, but I guess it didn't come to fruition. But still, Vince Carter is a beloved. Now he is. When he left, there was some animosity, or there was some.
Of course.
Yeah, there was some venom unleashed, but we've accepted him again as an honorary Torontonian. But Samuel, appreciate your time once again. I really enjoyed our conversation, and wish you all the best of luck in the hobby.
Clark, thank you. I appreciate you. Thank you for having me on. It's been a blast getting to know you in this space, and I'm looking forward to us connecting more and sharing our stories and learning from each other.
Awesome. All right, thanks again to Samuel Evans for the interview. We really appreciate his time and his perspective. Definitely brings a unique perspective to the hobby, and we really like the positivity he brings to the hobby itself with his content. So go check him out at the Sports Card Collector on Instagram and all the different socials he's on. All right, let's end off this episode with our regular weekly segment we call Pick One. And this is where each of us pick 2 cards usually, or 2 players, and then we debate which one we would rather invest in. Hyung, do you want to start things off for us again?
For sure. I'm going to go not cards. If you guys had, let's just say $5,000, right? Between these 2 players right now, as of July 13th, 2023, would you invest in Shohei Ohtani or Mike Trout? $5,000.
Oh man, that's a good one. Johnny, you go first.
Shohei Ohtani or Mike Trout?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Based on current values as of July 13th. And Mike Trout is out.
4 to 8 weeks.
He's still injured. And just throwing this out there, we did talk about Trout. He hasn't played a full season since 2019 or something like that, right? Just an FYI.
And that might continue for the rest of his career.
He's 31 now, yeah.
The common sense, and I think this theme has been coming up a lot in the last couple of episodes. The common sense is to obviously buy low and you sell high, right? And obviously we know who is the sell high and who is the buy low. But I'm still going to pick, maybe it's the FOMO in me, but I'm still going to pick Shohei Ohtani. I think he, other than possibly getting some sort of severe injury, I think he's on the trajectory of showing everybody that this is the true unicorn that you wait for generations upon generations of sports athletes. And I think Shohei has the chance, maybe not stat-wise, but when it's all said and done, he might have the chance to just, maybe be like the greatest player of all time. I don't know. Like, I think a lot of people are getting more and more convinced of that fact. And I think I'm going to jump on board of that bandwagon and go with Shohei Ohtani. And, even as a fan, it's just so exciting to watch him right now. So even if you're putting money into something and you're just enjoying a card, let's say you put $5,000 into some awesome Shohei Ohtani card, which I mean, in current state, I don't think $5,000 gets you much. But at least you get to enjoy the ride. And if you're going to spend that much money, you're probably a decent Shohei Ohtani fan. So yeah, it's Ohtani for me.
Well, you kind of alluded to it in your explanation of why you're choosing Shohei. Like with $5,000, I'm going to go for about 3 Trouts. You can stick with half a Shohei Ohtani card if you want. It's okay. You might get one good one, right? One really good one.
Right.
And, I could find 2 to 3 good Mike Trout cards. I can't quit Mike Trout, man. Like, I thought this up until just before the All-Star break, he was doing so well. And then he gets another freak a hamate bone injury.
How long is he out for?
Like up to 2 months. Yeah.
Oh man,
it's brutal.
That's rough.
As early as 4 weeks, but I'm not holding my breath on that. So I think Trout's a generational player still, and he's only 31. Like, yeah, he's getting up there, but he still has at least, I think, 4 or 5 good years in him, right? Where he could just put up the stats, and he's kind of just like, still waiting for that 1 year where he could put a full season together since 2019. And I think he can do it. It's not going to be this year, but I think it's coming, and then people are going to hopefully recognize how good he is, and, guys like our friend Scotty B. Cards will, remind people what his WAR is. And, he's just, the longer he plays, he just crosses another guy off the list that he just passed, right? He's like that good. And he's already has that much good stats behind his career. So I'm going to stick with Trout just because the value is there more so than Shohei. Although I'm FOMOing hard on Shohei still, so.
I am too. It's interesting. I think where you exit plays the crucial role, because I think what's inevitable is Shohei's on to his third MVP, or second or third, second MVP, and he's ridiculous. So you're going to enjoy that investment right now to the end of the season, and you're not going to get that out of Trout, that immediate. So Trout would be the logical sense in terms of the longer term, but you buy that, you're like, sweet, I finally got a Trout, and then it's like, it's locked in your safe or whatever, and it's just like you don't hear from Trout. Whereas that Ohtani is like what John was saying, it's like you're actually enjoying that Ohtani, because his trajectory till the end of this year is looking pretty good. He's doing stuff that, honestly, if he had 60 home, if he breaks Judge's record for home runs in the American League, that's why I'm saying it's like, and another MVP, it's like, that's what I'm thinking from a short term, but then long term, you have Trout, right? Yeah. So, and then the question is, what are you going to buy us? A rock hard of Shohei, but I still think there's still decent opportunities at the $5,000 where, there's potential in cards. So I'm going to say a selective Shohei Ohtani, actually, which is crazy because, I'm just realizing that, if you're in it for long term, you have to really just forget about the cards and be on that 2, 3, 4, 5, 10-year cycle and not worry about your purchases. But I rarely do that. I say I'm going to do that, but there always comes a time where it's like, okay, time to sell, right? And literally, I feel like the same way with Ohtani right now, and my card collecting habits right now. That's what I'm leaning towards, which is crazy because you're buying at super peak. But he's just so good. He's just so good.
Yeah, I agree with you. But, if he breaks Judge's record and, pitches as well as he does, that $5,000, it's not even going to get you a raw card. It's going to be one of those listings where it's a raw card and a please read description on it because there's something wrong with it, but it's still going to be $5,000.
Yeah.
But yeah, I like that one. I like that pick one. All right, Johnny, do you want to go next?
Yeah. So sticking with the niche sports theme, and our last Friday guest will probably enjoy this one. We're going to go with investment. Choose WWE cards or UFC cards.
Oh, it's a hard one because I don't know too much about it, I knew zero about wrestling until Shane came on our show. Shout out to Sports Card Nobody for coming on to explain the history of wrestling cards. And so I definitely appreciate, the value of wrestling cards though. But
did you watch wrestling as a kid?
Sorry?
Did you watch wrestling as a kid?
Yeah, the Hulk Hogan days, Randy Macho Man, Iron Sheik, the old
Ultimate
school
Warrior.
Yeah. But I think, man, I almost treat UFC kind of like F1 too. It was the flavor of the year, and it's kind of fallen out a little bit. But I still think there's a lot more potential in UFC, right? As a sport. I know wrestling fans are very passionate, and people who are into wrestling are really into wrestling. But I think UFC as a I don't want to say real sport because I don't want wrestling fans to come after me. But I think there's just more potential in UFC and like newer athletes coming up that could be a good potential card to collect that we haven't even heard of yet. So I think the sport is just growing in general, and I'll stick with UFC, but not totally confident with it.
This is interesting because normally I would have said UFC too because I would enjoy it more modern collecting. I like the Prism, all that stuff. But you specifically said for an investment purpose. I think there's historical sales in wrestling that it stabilizes the market a lot more than the UFC market. So I'm gonna actually go WWE from an investment standpoint. I grew up watching WWF, so it was obviously Hulk Hogan era, Andre the Giant, and I know those cards are highly sought after still, and that's probably where I would play personally from an investment standpoint. Is probably more of the historic markets that have had previous success. UFC, it's like, man, you're one punch away from, your career being done, and there's no longevity, in that, in my opinion. So until the market, UFC in general is such a young sport, right? Especially modern UFC, I would say. When we grew up, UFC was a totally different sport. Right. Like it was like Pat Smith, you got guys that were just going after people, and it was just so different, right? So I'm gonna go WWE.
Yeah, it took me a little bit to think about this, but once I gave it a bit of thought, I think it's fairly easy. I'm also on the train of WWE, and I think it's because a little bit of what Clark said, like flavor of the month for UFC, and I don't have stats to prove in front of me, but I'm going to assume the WWE fan base is way bigger and way more hardcore about WWE than the UFC fan base. UFC was really popular for all of us, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago. And I think it's lost a lot of its luster in terms of true fan base, especially from the general audience, like sports fan audience. And UFC doesn't, necessarily have any real big iconic stars, right? Like, and if you don't have a giant growing generic fan base, so even like upcoming rookies and studs and stuff, like there's not going to be many big chases, right? Whereas on the WWE end, I think especially in young males growing up, WWE captured like almost all of us in that sort of like Hulk Hogan Ultimate Warrior era. And then there's a bit of a gap. And then it captured almost all of us again in the sort of Steve Austin, The Rock era, right? So there are plenty of iconic studs to collect and go after in WWE, especially if you're talking about autos, right? Like Hulk Hogan. I think the latest Chrome or whichever product is it Prism that has like Hulk Hogan autos. I don't know if they ever get this done, but if they ever get like Dwayne Johnson, The Rock autos, like that would probably explode to the moon.
Yeah.
So I think for me, it's a pretty easy one, just because of the collectability of characters, like we usually talk about. It's a lot easier to transcend just, not just within niche sports. I think like WWE has a chance to capture, like the three of us. We probably will invest in The Rock Gold Refractor over somebody from the UFC, right? So, yeah, WWE.
Okay. All right. Well, I'll have one point that I just remembered Shane saying in the interview is that for some reason, WWE fans, when it comes to collectibles, cards isn't a huge thing yet, right? They would rather buy the championship belt replicas, and hang that up on their walls, or
Oh, that was a dream of mine back in the day.
right? So, so cards isn't a huge thing yet, but it could very well be in the future. All right, we'll end off with my pick one, which is more conventional pick one. It's baseball, and I promise this is going to be my last Elly De La Cruz. I feel like we talk about him a lot in each episode, but on one side I got the 2022 Bowman Chrome Elly De La Cruz Speckle Refractor Auto, numbered to 299. BGS 9.5, 10 gem mint. And on the other side, the 2017 Bowman Chrome Prospect Auto of Ronald Acuna Jr. base, BGS 9.5, same grade, 10 auto. And they both sold for just under $1,700. So same price point. You got Elly on one side with the Speckle Refractor numbered to 299. And then you got Ronald Acuna Jr., his base auto, 2017 Bowman Chrome.
I'm gonna go Elly De La Cruz on this real quick because
I did not see that coming.
I've had a relationship with Acuna Bowman Chromes for a long time, so I've seen that card go up and down and up and down and up and down and up and down, and it's a base card that I don't think a BGS 9.5 has surpassed 2,500. I could be wrong on that. Maybe it surpassed 3,000 at one point, but that was maybe peak. Whereas I think Elly still, if he ends up finishing the year strong, he has a chance actually at the Rookie of the Year. He continues to put up number, and I think that Speckle, any parallel of Elly could go high. Who knows, right? At that point, that's where emotions get involved, and people start doing dumb stuff, right? So this is where you could potentially sell that Elly for $5,000 down the near future. Whereas I don't see that with the Acuna base, right? So long term, obviously, I wouldn't even hesitate going long term with Elly because I believe in his talent. He's 21 years old still, big frame, 6'5", 6'6". He's super athletic, 5-tool player. Just has an idea hitting as well. So I'm gonna go. I really like Elly, man. Even for the long term, I think he's gonna be an unbelievable baseball player. And don't get me wrong, Acuna is my boy. It's just the base. If it was a refractor,
okay.
I think.
And just clarification, at its peak, it sold for just over $5,000. The base auto of Ronald Acuna. Yes.
Holy jeez, the BGS?
BGS 9.510.
The BGS?
PSA 10 went for $7,000. 7.
8? 7? Yeah, so I would say true value at the peak is probably $4,000. $5,000 probably came out because people are being stupid.
Yeah.
Real value that, I think Trout Bowman Chromes are $5,000 low, right? So, I mean, if it'll take years for Acuna, I think, to get there, it will be a slow, steady pace. Yeah.
Do you know the pops on 2017? I'd imagine they're printed a lot less than anything recently.
The pop
right?
count, did you say? The BGS 9.5 is 523.
And this is when Acuna's auto was nice. This is when he wrote with his right hand. And then after 2017, he started writing his autos with his left hand.
You got to save that throwing wrist. Okay. The last couple of these Elly De La Cruz 1v1s, I have completely drank the Elly Kool-Aid. I am not going to do that for a third or fourth time. I am picking Acuna. And I think Hyung is right in that there's more potential to go upwards because Elly has, can win the Rookie of the Year. I feel like it's baked in already. And you can actually make that argument for Acuna too. I think Acuna cards have gone up too because he's just been so far ahead of everybody else in terms of the NL MVP race, right? So I think both have that baked in, so it's even in terms of like potential for the rest of the year. For me, you might have got me if it wasn't the Speckle. I think all of the riffraff, and you're kind of probably already seeing it in some of the prices of like purple and some of these other like more random or unliked parallels. And I think Speckle is a part of that crowd of like generally unliked. Early on, you're just going to go for whatever you can afford and you're just going to grab it. But once people start to, their Cloud9 goggles come off and they're like, okay, let me really think about it here. I think Speckle is one of those cards. If and when Elly's cards correct, those are the ones that take a bigger hit than obviously like a gold refractor and some of the classics. So because of that, and on the flip side, Acuna, I don't necessarily want to pick base. It's a little boring. But I feel like Acuna he's one of the golden boys of baseball hobby. And he was lost for a bit because of all the injuries, et cetera, et cetera. And I think people were kind of feeling like maybe he's not a part of that crowd anymore. But he's quickly proving again, no, hang on. Like, I'm still a part of that crowd. Don't forget about me. So I think for Acuna, in terms of investment, I think he's starting to build up a little bit more confidence in terms of his floor. So I feel it's way less risky for a loss on the Acuna side. So it becomes a pretty easy choice for me. Boring, albeit, but I think it becomes an easy choice, Acuna.
All right, Acuna for John, Elly for Hyung. I'm going to break the tie. I don't know if you guys listened to my episode with Chris Begg last week when he was on, and then we're talking about Acuna, and he shared his story playing with Acuna Sr. You got to listen to that episode if you missed it. That was pretty cool. He knew Acuna Jr. when he was 3, 4, 5 years old, and
that's
just
right.
hanging around. But anyway, we're talking in that episode that he could be a 40-75 player. The only one in this exclusive club, right? And those numbers are ridiculous and insane. And then I kind of threw Hyung under the bus, saying I blamed him for not investing in Acuna cards because he was scaring me with his knee problems, right? So I'm not going to let Hyung, persuade me out of Acuna this time, right? I'm going to go. I'm all in. 40-75 club, even if it's a base auto. VGS 9.5. Oh man, Ronald Acuna he's the man. So, and I don't mind base autos because, it's not a problem for me. And
it wasn't necessarily that Acuna wasn't a great. It was for the price where his knee was at. Because it's like that blue auto I sold was 18K. 18K. It's like that's peak, and it's like that's like retracted like half. So it's like now it's like the rebuy. Okay, maybe it's the time if he does 40-75 and his prices are at that level. Then I think it would be a great buying opportunity. But his knee obviously with the stolen base time, like the time rule and everything, it helps. Which we talked about in the beginning of the season. It's going to help those guys that can really push, right? So,
fair point.
Just clarifying that.
But I'm going with Acuna this time. And I kind of agree with John's point about the Speckle Refractor. It's not my favorite. And the $299, those cards that are, $299 numbered to $399 just does, it's just odd to me. So, Acuna it is. All right. That ends this episode. Thank you for staying tuned, and we'll have a brand new episode for you guys shortly. All right, talk to you soon. Bye. Hey, thanks for listening to Cards to the Moon. We'd really appreciate you subscribing to our podcast wherever you listen to your podcasts. And you can also connect with each of us on Instagram at 5cardguys, or you can follow Hyung at Integrity Sports Cards, or John at TradeU@Recess. You can also check us out at 5cardguys.com. Thanks again, and hope to connect soon.